in a sense, we are keeping seeds going, and we are part of a many millennia long cultural history of how we continue having food on our plates to eat. And just want to really acknowledge and honor all those who've come before us and the others in the world today who are doing the same work. So thank you. With that, I'm excited to pass this off to Will, and I want to share a little bit. I was researching you, Will, a little bit, and learned some things I didn't already know, which is cool. I learned that you were born in Waterville, Maine. And tell me if any of this is wrong, otherwise we got to update the Wikipedia page. And you graduated from University of Maine at Orono in 1971. You spent some younger years hiking across the United States and Mexico.
And Canada, all over.
And Canada, and all over. And eventually returned to Maine to build the Cadigar farm on 85 acres in Industry, Maine, where he still lives today. He founded the Scatterseed Project in 1981, which exists to collect, maintain, and distribute thousands of varieties of crop plants, many of which are rare or endangered. He helped to found the Seed Savers Exchange in the early 90s, and in 2014 founded the Grassroots Seed Network. In 2015, Will also published his book, Will Bonsall's Essential Guide to Radical Self-Reliant Gardening, which you've got a few copies here today for sale. And in 2016, and this is how many of us in the group really learned what you were up to, is that you were in the documentary called Seed, the Untold Story. Will's really loving all this, I think. And I know just from a brief conversation that you experienced a seed collapse a few years back, is that right?
Experienced a what?
A collapse of your seed.
Oh yeah, very much. Yeah.
So maybe he would share a little more about what that's been like. But it's been a project lately to rebuild the seed supply, it sounds like. Yeah.
Good.
So with that, Will really has made a huge difference on the New England, Maine, and regional level, and also on a greater national level. Huge difference in building awareness for folks on how to do this lost art and really value how important it is in the grand scheme of our food systems. So with that, I'm going to pass it on over to Will.
Thanks, George. You did such a great job. I think I can get back up and go home now. And I was very interested to hear her description of this organization's mission, which seemed to line up almost verbatim with Scatterseed, my own purpose of collecting, preserving, and distributing. One of the reasons why my own project is called Scatterseed Project is because my focus is not on banking, although I do that, keep long-term preservation, but especially of having things be, what I say, on the shelf, things available. An awful lot of the varieties which I maintain are, are available from some other source. Some of them you find in some seed catalog. But one of the reasons why I tend to keep a lot of these things going, a lot of them are not available to you, because you might not know about them. There's a company out in Washington that offers this thing, and there's someone down in Florida that's got it, but you may not know about it. So one of my objectives, in addition to rare and endangered things, is to keep these things accessible. Not just alive, but accessible to you as much as possible. That being said, so I'll take the first few minutes here talking about my Scatterseed project, even though it's not why I'm here, not why we're here. In some ways it relates to what we're doing. In fact, in some ways it serves as a cautionary tale. As George explained very carefully, I started this thing many years ago. By the way, people get into seed saving different ways. The main way I got into it was for the most pragmatic, unideological purpose you can imagine. I simply wanted to save money. I was a hippie, out of college, back to the land, self-sufficient thing, like everyone else was. Keep your own goats and grow your own whatever, and I was very much into that. However, I was more than into it. I wanted not only to grow my own food, but I also wanted to grow the fertilizer for the food. I didn't want to be importing a lot of compost or manure or whatever from off-site, phosphate from Tennessee and stuff. I wanted to be producing that, the land to be producing its own sustenance. And moreover, also it became a no-brainer that seeds, keep saving my own seeds. And so initially I was not trying to save hundreds of varieties of tomatoes, I was just trying to save the varieties of tomatoes that I grew. Even though most of them I could go back and get from the seed catalog every year, I didn't want to do that. I wanted to buy it once and not again. So that was my first focus. And one of the implications of it is I end up, therefore, necessarily getting experience with a wide variety of things which most seed savers don't get into. And I want to share that with you, and I'm trying to encourage other people to do more of the same. Is things, if I was going to grow and eat kohlrabi, for example, then I will have to learn how to save my own kohlrabi seed, which is a little more complicated than saving my own tomato seed. So I had to jump through some additional hoops, and I hope we'll be talking a lot about that today. Incidentally, my notes are very half-assed, as is typical of me, and you notice I'm not even using very much. I have some sort of an outline. I'm trying to keep this a little bit organized, but I warn you right up front, the word organized and Will Bonsall are not synonyms. So I'll do what I can, but I may be digressing a bit and coming back, so we'll see how that works out. So anyway, yeah, it's great that we're such a nice group here today, because we know why there's so many of us here. This seed saving classes are always heavily attended, and it's because seed saving is all about sex. Okay? And we're all obsessed with sex, even if it's rutabaga sex. And incidentally, that's one of the reasons why, when I'm teaching people how to save seeds, I generally avoid jargon. I don't use words like styles and stigmas and answers and stuff like that. And I wasn't raised Catholic, so I don't have any Latin, and I basically use non-Latin words. But however weird and kicky some of these things may sound, the way that plants go about doing it, we know how we do it. So instead of using all those technical things, I used to say boy parts and girl parts. And as if you were a potato, and you could have boy parts, you had an innie and an outie, and you could do it to yourself, and you could make hundreds of babies and all that. Yeah, everyone giggles. No one walks out yet, but no one falls asleep either. But we understand because we know how we do it, even though it sounds weird making analogies to other things. So I tell you up front that I try to avoid jargon whenever I can. And so my scatter seed project, as Georgia mentioned, started for those reasons, mainly saving my own seed. In the process of growing and saving my own seeds, I accidentally ran into quite a few unusual things. Like I worked for a dairy farmer across town, and he had, among other things, he had a variety of potato that he grew and saved year after year after year, called the cowhorn potato. Purple skin, weird cowhorn shape, rough skin, very interesting texture, very unusual, unlike anything you'd find on the shelf. And it turned out that a lot of farmers in the neighborhood, and in fact across northern New Hampshire, northern Vermont, kept this variety going. But those farmers, for the most part, are dying. And their varieties that they have are dying. Because in many cases, the children and the grandchildren aren't farming anymore, they're not gardening anymore, they've gone away, they're now computer programmers, and they don't give a shit about all this stuff. So these things are being lost. Okay, so when I became aware of this wealth of stuff that was out there that was not on the shelf, you could not buy it from any seed company anywhere in the world. Some of these varieties, the Boosby blonde cucumber, which my parents came across on a camping trip. The people in the next site had this variety, been in their family for 5 generations, had never been commercially available anywhere. And they gave me some seed, and I propagated it, and eventually I shared it with Fedco Seeds and Pine Tree, and they took off, and now it's available in several seed companies. It's a very popular variety, Boosby. Any of you grow Boosby blonde cucumber? See, there's at least 2 people here that know this cucumber.
We have it here today, too.
There we go. Thank me for it. Okay? Otherwise, they never would have gotten out of the Boosby family if they haven't lost it themselves. But that's one of the things that makes me extremely proud about my scatter seed project. There are many varieties which I have even either put out there. Very few, almost none, that I've actually bred myself. Occasionally, I read somewhere in the media, I'll read myself, see where I'm described it. Will Bonsall, plant breeder. Like my head off at that. Because I don't know anyone on the planet who works hard at not being a plant breeder. Every morning I wake up and I say, how can I avoid breeding any new plants today? You know, my job is like Noah. My job is to collect these things, put them in the ark, keep them there for 40 days a night until hell freezes over, and then make them back available again. But insofar as possible, to keep them just what they are, not to improve them. Some of these things may be worth crap, some of them may be priceless. I don't necessarily know that, and it's my job to make those decisions. My job is to keep them available so plant breeders and gardeners, including you folks of the future, can do what you will with it. I'm not a plant breeder. Now, plant breeding, like the bumper sticker, plant breeding happens. In spite of my best efforts, I have bred at least 2 varieties of crops which are popular on the market. One of them, which I've seen in companies in Britain and in Tasmania and many companies, a dozen or 20 companies, now offer Gardener's Sweetheart cherry tomato. Hey, that's me. I bred it kind of accidentally, but it turned out being a very superior cross. And another one which currently is in the process of getting to, a couple of seed companies are getting it up to speed for offering, is a pepper called Virginia pepper. Again, I didn't mean to, honest, but I did it quite on myself. And they're both two very superior varieties. I'm not ashamed of them, but that's not my job. Anyway, so for many years, ever since the 80s or actually mid-70s, I've been running my scatter seed project, offering things to people. My main strategy for keeping these things alive is not keeping them at a deep freeze. There's lots of things in favor of seed banks, like the big island in the Arctic, where they've got the doomsday vault and so on. There's good reasons for all those, and the national germplasm collection. There's good reasons for all of those things. On the other hand, they are inherently vulnerable because of their nature, that they are very concentrated. There are many, many eggs in one basket, and they depend on government subsidies and politics and things like that. So they are not totally secure. They're, for what they are, they're very, very good. But I've always felt that the most secure place to maintain genetic diversity is in our horticultural landscape, the farms and gardens of us, keeping these going. And moreover, I've discovered some people will have a big collection of tomatoes or a big collection of beans. So that's very cool. No, nothing at all to be said against it. But my own experience is that people will forget about labors of love. I've learned long ago, don't trust labors of love. They're not sustainable. Is if you're having this food on your plate, next year depends on your mating seed, then you'll do it. You'll do a good job. So when people ask me, what should I save seed of? I said, what do you eat? What do you like? And I'd like to encourage you to like to eat more things. You don't eat parsnips, well, try parsnips. And then when you get used to eating parsnips, can't do without them, then yes, you will save your parsnip seeds. So that's, I think, is a far more visceral incentive to maintain these things, is because you personally, your life depends on your own personal security. As I don't have to tell anyone, we're living in an age which is very unstable. There's a lot of doo-doo hitting the fan right now, a lot of insecurity, particularly in terms of global food supplies. It's hard for you to know what to do on the big picture scale. It's hard to know. Yeah, vote for the right people and promote the right things and all that. But the one thing you can do, and least thing you should do, is as much as possible, take responsibility for yourself. So a lot of the people that talk about, how many of you here a garden? It's pretty universal, not everyone, okay? So number one, hey, garden. Start, whatever food you get, instead of getting it from McDonald's or off the shelf, start getting it from a local farm market. Preferably an organic, but go try to buy it locally. And then better yet, grow yourself. I'm going on to levels in the spectrum. Go to growing your own, and processing your own, and storing it for the winter and so forth. And yes, eventually you get to the point, sooner than later I hope, where you say, I've got to save the seed of this. One quick example I'll give you. Many years ago, we came across a variety of paste tomato called Royal Chico. We got it from a company out in California, and we grew it, and we liked it very, very much. It was a bit late. This is not California, and it was a paste tomato. Very dry, very solid, very pulpy, real good ketchup and sauce tomato. A little bit late, which meant that when the first killing frost came along, about a third of them was still green. Well, for us, that was perfect. So when that first comes, first frost comes, we're chasing our butts around trying to get everything else in. And if we can put something off for a little bit, so what we would do is pull up the whole tomato plants, roots and all, not most of the dura, hang them from nails in the cellar, shake off or pick off all the red ones. But then in the ensuing weeks, as those tomatoes would ripen on the vine, we picked them, and it enabled us to, we had again a bigger yield and spread out the harvest season. So that was very, very good. Well, that fits with our particular style of growing, storing, processing tomatoes, not everyone else's. Most people would like to have all their tomatoes right long before the first frost. And so I think Johnny's may have been the company that offered that variety for some years. I think they may have got it from me originally. It was originally from this California company. And eventually they got rid of it because it's a kind of late. We've got this other paste tomato, Heinz 2653, something like that, which is somewhat earlier. And a good bit juicier. I don't want juicy. This is not for eating out of the hand. There's another stuff I want it for paste tomato. So we're offering this one instead, which is an improvement. Well, maybe for most gardeners, fine. For me, the Royal Chico was what I wanted to. and now it was off the market. Since then, it's been on and off the market several times. I don't know, and I don't give a poop, because I keep my own seed. Because I don't trust the marketplace to keep that variety that suits my particular purpose. If you're an off-the-shelf person, you go everything the way everyone else does, you only like the things that everyone else, then fine, you're fine with the seed company. They've got what you need. But if you have anything unique about your situation, your garden's a little wetter than somewhere else or drier than somewhere else, you do things organically, other people don't, you like this kind of cucumber and other people don't. If there's anything particular about your taste, your habits, your custom, then you need to get control of the input. So, now, a lot of you, I'm preaching to the choir here, I suppose. A lot of you already figured this out long before I came along. This may be digressing a bit, but someone said a while ago we were talking about seed libraries. I would like to say some things about seed libraries. Some good and bad, mostly good. But there are some caveats involved with the seed libraries, and we will like to discuss those a bit. And this is probably as good a time as any to talk about that. Well, I'll get there by this means. Two of the important things that you need to look, if you're going to save just bean seeds and tomato seeds, then you know what you need. There's nothing, they're annuals, they're self-pollinating. You grow 10 bean varieties, 100 bean varieties all in your garden the same year. Every year they self-pollinate, you don't got to worry about that. And they're annuals. You plant them in the spring, harvest in the fall, go to Aruba for the winter, they're fine, you're all taken care of. That's great. Okay? Tomatoes, that works great. But some things are not quite so simple. And unfortunately, it's one of the reasons why many people do not save seed of those things. I've had so many people tell me, I've grown carrots year after year after year, and I've never seen a carrot seed. Where did the carrot seeds come from? And their answer would be, out of seed packet, of course. And how do the carrots make carrots? Well, they have to understand that they're a biennial. Carrots will spend 1 year, I'll go into much more depth later. They spend 1 year making the carrot, that's all, making a vegetative, asexual part. The second year, that means you've got to get them to the second year. You've got to get through that freezing in the winter. And the second, then it's a process called vernalization, which is basically called reality check. It's Mother Nature saying, you're not immortal. A biennial is basically, I describe as an annual in denial. It thinks it's going to live forever. And along comes winter and tells it otherwise. Okay? And so it takes 2 years before it does its sex thing. Okay? It's, in some ways, it's really smart. It's a smart strategy. Don't we wish our teenagers would do that? Put money in the bank, Don't go messing around with someone. So you get save up and then think about getting married and doing family stuff. And don't start it too soon. Because you need to have this energy source, this source of wealth to do the thing properly. And a tomato doesn't do that, doesn't have to. Tomato has no illusions whatever. It knows from the moment that seed germinates that it has got this seed, it's got 120 days more or less before it's going to grow, flower, make fruits, ripen seed, and die. It knows, it gets right to work. The rutabaga, for example, is a different story. It's again a biennial. It's in denial. So anyway, we have to treat them differently. So that's why I say everyone's so interested in this, because it's all about sex. Because you think you know all about sex, but there's an awful lot, particularly with plant sex, that you don't know. My daddy never said a word about fertilization. He never said a word about cloning. I didn't know about that. So it becomes very relevant for this stuff. So it does affect how you save seed and some of the hoops you have to jump through. Now, I don't think we probably have enough time in this present conversation to do that, but I'm going to be here for the rest of the time, as Georgia mentioned, prepared to discuss these things in some more detail for those of you. That way I'm going to tell everyone that doesn't give a poop about it, what they don't want to know. So anyway, back to my scatter seed project. So yes, so for many, many years, decades now, I've been maintaining these things, thousands, literally thousands, over 5,000, I don't know, varieties of plants, of cultivated plants. Most of them seeds, some of them are asexual clones like potatoes and apples and things like that. But maintaining them and as much as possible making them available to you and you and you and you. And that's the good news. There is good news and bad news and then more good news. The bad news is several years ago, Seed Savers Exchange, which had a curator network of about half a dozen or 4 or 5 of us, who collectively were maintaining a backup of all of these thousands of varieties of things, which were in the Seed Savers Exchange general membership, which I'll have a bit to say about in one of my follow-up things. And at one point they got a very generous endowment of $2-3 million to maintain the collections. At that point they decided they didn't really need us curators anymore. They could just do it all themselves there. Well, one part of me said, well, that's good, wonderful, I can get a life now, we don't need you to do it. But years since then, I've discovered that they're not doing as good a job as they could of some of these things. They are losing stuff. And so I'm a bit embittered, frankly, that they dumped us, stopped us from doing something that they are not. If they were doing it well, I'd say great, but they're unfortunately not. And that's why, as Georgia mentioned, several of us started an organization called the Grassroots Seed Network for the purpose of being more democratic. That was the main objective, to be more democratic in Seed Savers Exchange. Never expected to have the resources they have or the membership they have, but it has been growing steadily, and I'm very much involved in that. But in the meantime, because of this lack of funding that came from the Curators Network, in the last few years especially, I've had slashed budget, which caused me to lose most of my collections. Of these thousands of varieties, I'm going to say easily 90% of them are now dead. I have, for example, probably about 1,100 varieties of peas on the shelf from all over the world, many different varieties. And maybe 10% of them, peas are not so bad, maybe 20% of them are still alive. The rest, there's the peas, but they're dead. Jumping ahead a little to seed libraries, one of the big differences with a seed library and a book library is that books, seeds are living things. They're dormant, they're just dried seeds, but they, unlike books, they're alive, and you could leave a book on the shelf for 30 years and take it out, and it'll be just as good as it was. The words are still there as it was. Not the case with seeds. They have to be rejuvenated from time to time. Therein lies the problem. It's part of the blessing of seed libraries, it's part of the curse of seed libraries, coping with that issue. So anyway, I've lost the vast investment. I still get all the credit, people, and I'm still getting donations, which I need to try to salvage what I've got left. That's the bad news. And it's very bad, because some of the varieties that I've got were unique to me that they probably now extinct from the planet. I may be the last person on the planet that had it. Maybe a big deal, maybe not. It may have been not a great variety anyway. But in some cases, it is lost, and I may be years, if ever, before I learn which ones those were. So that's truly bad news. The good news is the vast majority of the things in my collection are still available from somewhere. In many cases from the source I originally got it from. I got it from someone in Seed Savers Exchange, well, they still have it. Or I got it from the USDA National Germplasm System, they still got it. It may be from some commercial catalog, and they still have it. In the vast majority of cases, that's the case, I can go back and get it from either the source I originally got it from, or someone who got it from me. Just last year, I sent a message to my friend Keith at Cornell University, the potato collection. I wanted to get some of the potato varieties they had, and I said, can I get some? He said, of course, Will, we'll be happy to give them back, because most of them came from you originally, and I was glad to be reminded of that, so that made me feel really good. This is kind of noisy, but it's better than the two I have a very bad back from a lifetime of back injuries, and that's why I'm sitting like this, and this worked really well. So yeah, I'm able to get them back, and I hope to. The problem with that is I'm 73 years old. I still feel pretty young, but I'm prepared to resume to get back these collections, resurrect them, and rebuild them, and go on with my work. But I don't want to get back all these thousands of varieties and immediately lose them again. So I'm very slowly acquiring them as my ability to handle them. I'm hoping eventually my long-term goal is to have a sustainable source of funding, which I'm working on, and sustainable core of people, hopefully much younger people, to take over the project and run it so that I can die any day and know that this stuff will keep going. That's my fantasy. I can die tomorrow and my collection will keep right on going. Yeah, that won't matter. That'd be cool. So anyway, so much for that. So incidentally, this is a total digression. I will mention, I think she mentioned my book. I have very few copies of my book here, but Will Bonsall's Essential Guide to blah, blah, blah. It wasn't my title. The publisher, it was supposed to be Gardens Without Borders. Doesn't that sound cute? It's very simple, straightforward. But the publisher said, we're not sure what that means. And I said, well, since they read the first page, they'll know what it means. And they said, no, when they're standing there in the aisle of Barnes & Noble, they won't get that far. They've got it. So they came up with this Will Bonsall's Essential Guide to Radical, Sustainable Farming, Gardening, I guess it is. I can't remember. Anyway. I've got a couple copies with me. You can get more on mine, or I have a whole case of them at home. I would have brought them all here, but I forgot, came away without them. But I mention that only because it's all over the place. It's a very big, very comprehensive book. It deals with issues of plant-based fertility and all kinds of things. But there are within it 2 units, one on sexual propagation, basically seed saving. So the whole book is not about seed saving exchange, don't expect that, but there's a big unit that goes into quite a lot of depth on it. And then there's another unit on asexual seed saving, in other words, clones and grafting apples and so forth, propagating things from runners and things that don't make seeds. Okay. Okay, let me see what so this might be a good point to talk a little about the idea of seed libraries and some cautionary tales about them, what's good about them and what's not so good but can be dealt with about them. Seed collections. There are two reasons why one saves seeds in a way, or has seed collections. One is to preserve them, in which case it's very important to keep them pure. You don't want incompetent people dealing with these things. They're going to let them get all crossed up. But another purpose for them, and I think this is the main place where seed libraries become very valuable, is simply to become, as a community, not only as individuals becoming more self-reliant, but as our neighborhood, this group of people, that we are more responsible for ourselves for keeping these varieties going. And in that case, it may not matter all that much if your Danvers half-lawn carrots get slightly crossed up with your red cord chantenay because you didn't have them quite far apart. A cross of those two varieties would be, in my opinion, quite elegant. And moreover, those varieties are both offered by many, many seed companies around the place. So if you grow it for several years and eventually realize, no, this is not like the old variety we had, let's get it back in, no problem, okay? If this is some variety that you got, as many of my varieties are, you got it from some little old lady down in Oklahoma who she's in a nursing home now and her barn burned down and she's lost this variety and her grandkids have nothing to do with it. I'm the last person that has it, then I better do it bloody well, okay? I better know what I'm doing. So you got to decide where you are in that situation. And in the case of seed libraries, and any kind of community seed saving strategies can be very, very effective. Particularly with species which cross-pollinate. I think she alluded to that a little bit. If I really like red cord chantenay carrot, well, you all like red cord chantenay carrot, but let's say you don't have room enough to keep it, because for one thing, you have to keep it at least 100 meters between varieties to keep it pure. And that's also assuming you don't have any Queen Anne's lace. Who has a garden that doesn't have Queen Anne's lace? I don't know. So which is called wild carrot. Technically it's not wild, it's feral carrot, gone wild carrot. And it will cross. So let's say you only have the capacity for maintaining seed of one variety. But you like red cord chantenay, and you also like scarlet ants, and so do you, and so do you. And it's 8 or 10 varieties we'd all like, but we can only, so let's say I will be responsible for all, hey you guys, don't worry about the red cord chantenay, got it covered. You're going to do the scarlet ant. You're going to do the Kinko, Forto, or something like that variety. So we'll all have, we're sort of like a mini cooperative seed company in a way. We're doing it for ourselves. And that can work very, very well. The main thing about it, the same thing with seed libraries, is I've got to know that you know what the hell you're doing. Are you responsible? Do you have any Queen Anne's lace around your place you don't even recognize? Am I not going to place the oval into these carrots? They're all going to rot before I don't know what I'm doing. So we have to know each other and trust each other. But that being said, that being done, if we can trust the people we're cooperating with, an enormous advantage. But that's one of the problems when someone, as I understand the way, at least what I've heard of some seed libraries working, someone comes in, they take a sample of this variety out, and with the understanding at the end of the season, they'll bring fresh seed back. And again, do we know that person? Are they going to bring back? Because my experience with cooperative seed networks is pretty negative. Is they very often don't know that they'll bring something that doesn't even look like the original. So unless you have either some kind of control over that, you have a core of people who really know what they're doing, or you decide it doesn't matter that much. We can have some impurity creeping in, it's more important. Either way, I'm for it. For any strategy for people saving their own seeds and cooperating with saving seeds. I'm for anything collective cooperative. I'm a commie at heart. I just work anything we're doing collectively is a good idea. And but it'd be better if we can all do it well in addition to that. Okay. Let's go some of the angles of this. In the beginning, I was going to give a couple of examples, and I think I will anyway, even though some of you, you have your own motives for doing this. You have a general sense of the importance of seed preservation for the sake of genetic diversity. When I first started saving seeds, by the way, no one was using, at least I had not heard of anyone using the word heirloom, heritage seeds. What's that all about? I was not aware of genetic extinction, gene pool truncation, stuff like that. What's that? I'm just saving my own damn seeds so I don't have to go back to the company year after year. But as I became more aware of that, well, there are a couple of things that made me aware of. One, before I even moved my farm, when I was still in college, I remember reading an article in some newspaper about, I think it was in 1970, an epidemic of a disease called southern corn leaf blight broke out in the southeastern United States. And most diseases like this pop up with most crops There's usually, it'll do damage somewhere with a certain part of the crop, but some of the crop will have resistance to it, or it won't even get there, or whatever. In this case, all of the corn grown in the United States, all the many hundreds of so-called varieties that were being grown, field corn, all had this thing called Texas cytoplasm. I think I'm getting this right. It was either, the problem was either because of Texas cytoplasm or in spite of it. But anyway, there was a certain genetic uniformity. Varieties from Walla Walla to Miami, where all had either this gene or this lack of genes that left them very vulnerable to this new strain of southern corn leaf blight. So that during that season, it went through the nation's corn crops like Sherman went through Georgia. It was like some counties in Iowa lost like 60 or 80% of their corn crop was lost. Nationwide, I believe it was 15% of the corn was lost. Now, corn is a biggie. 15% of the nation's corn crop. You're talking about billions of dollars, lost exports and all that. This is something that got people's notice. And they started, we got to come up with a solution. And BDQ, we can't over the years come up with something. So they immediately went through all the USDA corn collection in Ames, Iowa. Tens of thousands of corn varieties from all over the planet. And they screened them. And they came up with a particular variety, I think, from Mexico, which had resistance to this disease. And so they had to breed genes from that one accession into all the corns of the country. And they had to do it very, very fast. Well, the main thing that allowed them to do it was the USDA germplasm system has a tropical research facility in Mayagüez, Puerto Rico, where during the winter they were able to grow 2 or 3 generations each time, breeding, crossbreeding, coming up with a whole spectrum of varieties that had resistance to this. Varieties that did well in Spokane, varieties that did very well in Atlanta or whatever. So that by the following spring, America's corn farmers were able to hit the ground running with the tools that they needed to grow it. That is pretty bloody big. In fact, this is one single variety within the National Germplasm. They maintain hundreds of thousands of varieties of corns, soybeans, palm trees, whatever. The USDA collected is back, a network of regional facilities. And they spend some millions of dollars every year on maintaining this thing, and a bunch of PhD lab-coated plant geneticists stuff working on this stuff. Cool. As I understand it, they're always having to fight to get funding. They're always getting nickel and dime to put a lower priority. And yet, if during the years of the National Germplasm's existence, all these millions that they've spent, if they had thrown away all the other stuff, hadn't bothered with it, and just put all that money in maintaining that one little variety from Mexico, it would have been absolutely cost effective. It would have totally paid. And that's not counting all the other thousands of varieties that they breed and release every year, all the other crops. Just that one variety made the entire thing worthwhile. So when they say, we have to watch our budget here, I said, no, throw money. If there's anything the U.S. government does that we should throw money at, just write a blank check and do whatever you need to get it. It is that. Our USDA, our plant breeding sector, and our lives and the food in the marketplace depends on the system. It is so big. So anyway, and then, another example I can give is cabbage breeders have come to the conclusion, I don't know how they learned this, but there apparently was a variety of Cornish cauliflower in Cornwall, southwestern England, variety, which had resistance to I think it's a ring spot, one of the cabbage diseases. Cauliflower is cabbage, by the way. We'll talk about this a little later. It's the same species, Brassica oleracea. And it had resistance. Oh, wonderful. Hey, all we got to do is get some Cornish cauliflower and breed it new, right? Only problem is Cornish cauliflower is now extinct. And the fields in Britain where Cornish cauliflower used to be grown has now been replaced by some French hybrids or something. So we've lost that critical component that would have helped an important crop deal with an important disease. So yeah, it matters. And again, we can leave it all up to the USDA and to the Svalbard and the Arctic island collection. We can leave it up to the various organizations and companies and things that maintain these things. We can do that, or we can, insofar as possible, take it into our own hands and maintain it responsibly, because your life depends on it. A point I want to make, it's a good place to end. I usually wind up a thing with it, and I don't know if I'm winding up now or not, but whenever I have new workers come to work on my scatter seed project, this is, brace yourself, get ready to hold your breath, because this is very inspirational. I hope you all get this. Whenever I have a new worker, I'll sit them down and say, look, something you got to understand. If you stay here all season of work and come back next season of work, you keep working for me, you got to accept the fact that in the course of your work here, you are going to cause me to lose you're going to screw up. You're going to cause me to lose some variety, maybe an important variety. It may not cause it to conceivably to go extinct, or at least to be lost in my collection. That could happen. So always be a little tight. Be looking over your shoulder. Be scared. Do it right. There's one thing that's worse than that, though. It's if you don't show up and you don't do it all, we're going to lose all of them. So on the one hand, know that however much you do and however well you do it, it's not going to be enough. But however little you do, it's important and you've got to do it. They're two sides of the same coin. Keep them in mind. So, do we want to do questions now? I think I keep going on, I'm sure, but as she mentioned, we're talking about in the after session a thing on overwintering biennials. We'll talk about the best way to deal with biennials and pollination control, whether it be caging or isolation or even hand pollination. I tell you, that gets pretty kinky if you want to get into that. I mean, if you show up wanting to learn about that, I'm going to look at you really carefully. We were going to do dry processing, but someone is already doing that. So what was the third one? Oh yeah, sources of things. We talked about some of these things like Seed Savers Exchange and National Germplasm System, your tax dollars at work. We'll talk about that in some length. There is so much stuff out there. You cannot imagine. Some of it's right in your own backyard. People in your local grains, but that's got some things growing that their grandparents grew. And there's other things that come from some God knows who. There's a lot of stuff out there. And you can get it. You can access it. I can help you access it if need be. But once in most of these cases, unlike the seed catalog, they sell you some of this pea variety seed this year. They're very happy for you to come back. That's one of the reasons for hybrids, by the way. The hybrids may or may not be superior, but they make you a captive customer. So if I sell you this hybrid Brussels sprouts, you got to come back next year. I'm sorry, we'll talk about that in the other section. But you can't maintain your own of F1 hybrids. So they're trying to keep you. They want you to come back. My point is, they want you to come back year after year by the same seeds. These other organizations, including USDA, they don't want you to. You get something from my scatter seed project, I don't want to ever see you again. Not about that particular variety. Not about that. Come back next year and get some other variety. But I'm telling you, keep going next year. I want another. That was great. I want another pound of it. Sorry, Carl. That was your job. So therefore, if you're going to access these seeds and be responsible about it, again, you've got to learn how to do it. And generally, it's not rocket science. You, particularly with biennials and cross-pollinating species, do require you to jump through some additional hoops, well within your skill set, or will make it within your skill set. And I would urge you to do that. And again, getting back to seed libraries and various community strategies, these things tend to be all about tomatoes and beans. Seed Savers Exchange, the annual yearbook, is, I think, like 20% of it, or maybe a lot more than that, is tomatoes. I mean, I love tomatoes, don't get me wrong. I'm not one of those macrobiotics things. I'm not down on tomatoes a bit. No, I love them. I love many different kinds of them. But I eat a lot of stuff other than tomatoes. I want to keep the seed going of all those other things too. And so to be effective at these, not just saving the usual ones, but the more complicated ones, I would like to develop among this group a cadre of people who know the next step, who take it go to the next level and can be more effective at maintaining more stuff. Someone's got questions at this point? Oh, come on. I didn't do that good of a job.
I have a question. I was given some beans from a woman who said that these beans were grown in Epping, New Hampshire since the Civil War. And there was a particular farmer at this place, it used to be called Green Pastures, and that man, Jack Carter, had grown this out. I talked to another Epping farmer last year, and she remembered getting Jack's beans.
Yeah.
And I have some.
You had some.
I have some. So she gave me like this jar of beans.
So
and
someone had been
how
saving
do
all
I
this.
go about? So my question is, this seems really cool and a
It's so
nice
cool.
history of this particular bean. How do I go about finding? Because when she said it was grown since the Civil War, I thought, oh, I wonder if a soldier came back from the Civil War and brought these beans back. I'm making this up, of course. Nobody go tell anybody that these beans. But wouldn't that, because a lot of beans, of course, are from the South, that's like much more of a tradition. So how do I go about trying to find out some more information about this bean, or identifying it, or something like that?
I'm going to be very little help to you on that for these reasons. Number one, that's just the time frame. It doesn't mean it was brought back from the South. Very likely it was not. in fact, it probably was grown in Epping, New Hampshire long before the Civil War. Maybe that's the furthest back they've got some document, there's a local lore about it. They may have been come up with the Pilgrims or something. I mean, we don't know that. And beyond what you've done already and are doing already, that's my answer. I'm going to throw it back at you. Yeah, ask around the people, see what lore there is, and a lot of that's seed lore, and that's a beautiful part. Unfortunately, the USDA they got varieties from all over the world, and none of it has seed lore. These are collected by male PhD people with lab coats. You know, they're interested in the genetics of this stuff, and in most cases they don't take it home and cook it, eat it. They can't tell you what they. I was really surprised once looking through one of the reports of the USDA cabbage collection, and there was actually a field, a category for flavor, whether it was hot, bitter, sweet, and all that kind of stuff. In most cases, you will not find that. It may taste like horse crap, and you won't know it until you go out and eat it. They'll tend to have things like it has some resistance to halo blight or that kind of stuff, and that's very helpful. But I want to get back to your specific example because if we're talking about heirloom varieties or heritage varieties, that is something that's thrown around a lot nowadays, and generally very carelessly. A lot of varieties that are just open pollinated that don't have much of a history to them are referred to. Open pollinated is used as a synonym for heirloom, and really it is not. But you've got a classic example of an heirloom variety. It's named in one individual, one villa, one community, by a family or something. My Boosby blonde heirloom cucumber is the exact same thing. They documented it back at least 5 generations. They didn't mean it started then. That's how far they know about it. It may have been much longer ago than that. So what you've got right now, the seed and that lore you've got is precious. Where can you find more? I don't think that you can. Well, talk to more people, see maybe someone else altogether different. But be careful not to jump to a conclusion, which you just did. Came back from the Civil, maybe it was brought back from the South because of the Civil War. It goes back to the Civil War. It may have never been anywhere but Eppington and New Hampshire. So because sometimes the lore gets added. I found sometimes a story will grow from someone making an assumption. And you've got to be a little careful of that. I found, incidentally...
Well, we want our seeds to have a good story.
Yeah, and you've got
because
great
that
stories.
talks to the people that had the seeds, and then you have that whole...
And you've already got a great story right now, what you know for a fact, or at least the lore. Just be careful you don't embroider the lore, unless for very good reason of certainty. By the way, when I offer a variety of seed in my yearbook, I have thousands of varieties. Some of them are just something I got from USDA. It has a 6-digit number and TKY. It's from Turkey, and that's all I know about it. I got from them because something in the listing looked interesting about it. It was resistant to something or other. And I'll offer those varieties. And 2 things come to mind. One, a pea variety that I had, it was from Turkey, and it was a dark purplish seed. I grew the seed out. I'd never eaten it before. I didn't know much about it. When you have 1,100 varieties, you don't get to eat every one of them. Some of them are snow peas, some are table peas, some are field peas, some are fodder peas. In many cases, I don't even know that. Sometimes I can tell by looking at the seed. But anyway, I had this variety they offered. And and for years I offered, no one ever, I don't think I got a single request for it. Well, not surprising. I'm not saying anything good or bad about it. Finally, a young woman that I knew in Maine asked us, do you want to try it out? And she grew it out. She tasted like a sweet pea. She shelled it out, ate it as a sweet pea. She said it was the most grossest tasting pea she ever had in her life. So I put that in my listing. I'm not a seed company. I'm not typing this stuff. This is what someone said. All of a sudden I got 4 or 5 listing requests for that seed. I think they wanted to know exactly, Will Bonsall's got 1,100 peas. What does he consider the most horrible tasting pea anyway? And later I found out it was not intended to be, I should have, looking at it, I should have at that time suspected it wasn't meant to be a table pea. It's meant to be a field pea, like a Capri-Signer pea, which you use them like a dry bean. You cook them up. And they make a nice rich gravy, and it's quite good that way. But eating out of the hand, no. Another example I give is a bean that I got from someone somewhere, a sulfur bean. And I offered it for several years. And at one point, my late uncle lived in Waterville, and I got a note from him saying, Bill, that's me, saying, Bill, my grandfather and my uncle and my dad and their father had a Bonsall and Herson grocery store in Waterville, Maine for years. And he said, Bill, do you know where a fellow could get some sulfur beans? He said, Bonsall's used to be the only place around that you could get them. And I sent him back a pound of beans and said, Uncle, it still is. Although I wasn't, there were other people had it too, but he didn't want to plant them, he just wanted bags, so okay, just get them out of my hair, because he was like that. Anyway, the varieties have a story. Oh yeah, and I put that story in my listing. The story about what Uncle Henry said to me. I put them, all of a sudden I was twice as many requests for this writing. Just with my little story, which had nothing to do with the quality of the thing, just there was now a story. So yeah, lore is everything if you're in the heritage food thing. You know, so the commercial farmers, they don't care much. I mean, the commercial seed company, you can't sell a lore. They won't promote, wow, what is this agronomic feature, which is totally important. But some of us just want a story. We want to be connected with this in some way. Yeah. Thanks for all that. Yeah.
I have a question. In all your years saving seed, have you noticed varieties improving over time because they are geographically adapted since you start, being...
Yeah, and thanks, George. I noticed that a little bit, but not very much. But that's mainly because of my being rather obtuse. When I'm growing so many hundreds of varieties, I really am grateful for people who get seeds from me and they get, they grew 2 or 3 things they got from me, and they write back saying, by the way, this one, da-da-da-da-da. I didn't know that, probably. I've been growing for 30 years and offering it, but because they're growing a finite number of things, they'll notice some little nuance about it, which because of my scale, I tend not to be. Generally, my hope is that it won't change. Again, if I were a plant breeder, I'd be very happy to see this variety that originally got it from Kentucky, but in Maine, it does not as well, or maybe better. Because maybe it's really well adapted for my Maine soil and does better than it was. Notice, for example, beans that I've gotten in Iowa, Heritage Farm, Seed Savers Exchange in Heritage, Iowa, they maintain a bean collection there. And several times they've sent me beans that they've grown. And sometimes the variety they got from me, and I get back from them, and I've noticed these seed coats are not as big, not as vibrant. Something about the Midwestern, the Iowa soil, I don't know. The Maine soil would give a brighter, and I don't think it's genetics. In that case, I think it's just simply that the soil is different. It's more vibrant in the way that it was when I first sent it to them. As far as whether it's improved or not, and again, it's not my responsibility, it's yours. You get the variety, you notice if it's improved or not, and if you want to select for some improvement. So let's say just a word now about selecting, because again, when you're selecting plant, and you're going to selecting happens, the paraphrase bumper sticker. You're going to select things, even if you don't intend to select things, just by virtue of how you grow things, where you are in New Hampshire, what your soil, whether it's organic or not, whether you're in a limestone soil or whatever, those things will make changes in determine how some things respond. And what you do about that is totally up to you. But if a variety does show any change, however subtle, however improved or not, you have to decide whether your main goal is to breed, improve the variety, or simply to preserve it. Mine is simply to keep it as is. Again, I'm Noah. I'm not, the person that improved it. If you are interested in improving it, then you will know what to look for. But that's my point. Keep in mind, number one, know what you're looking for, and know what are the distinguishing traits of this variety. Because just for example, this one once took, they grew some Amsterdam forcing carrot, small little kits, the kind like they use, like you buy them in the store, they all look like they were turned on a lathe, you pop a little snack, little cute little thing. They grew that variety, very early maturity, sweet. Don't cook it; it turns to mush. You want it. It's a crisp little salad, crudity thing, perfect for that. Well, some person had a whole bunch of the carrots they grew last year. They dug them up, and they looked at it. They saw 1 or 2 of them. This one is a lot bigger, a lot longer than that. I should save that. And I pointed out to them, it depends what you're trying to do. Because you're going to lose that large carrot. You're going to get a bigger yield? Yeah. You're going to lose those small, delicate carrots. You're going to carrot that's better for cooking. You're going to make changes in it. Are those what you want? If you want this delicate, raw, crisp salad, then that's the very last one you want. Also notice some people look at a row of tomatoes, let's say tomato plants. You have to select by the whole plant, not by a particular part of it, because the genetics is throughout the plant. So you look at a tomato plant, and you got, on this one plant, this one plant was a little later maturing than the other, but there was one fruit right up there at the end. That was earlier than all of the rest. I'm going to save seeds of that one, and I'll get early tomatoes, right? That just happened to be the earliest fruit on that tomato plant because it was the sunniest or something or other. But overall, other than that, the rest of the tomatoes in that plant, which are basically the same, are quite a lot later. You'd be better to save seed from one of the plants that was consistently, overall the plant was earlier yielding. And again, it's assuming that earliness is the thing we're looking at. Know what you're after. You want early, you want flavor, you want resistance to some disease, and select for that. So first, get to know the variety in the first place. Those genes aren't there for it, there's not much point in trying to select for that. But if they are, know what you're looking for, know how to recognize it, and again, save it. Even if you don't intend to select, you're doing some selecting anyway. So why not do it deliberately and carefully? Yeah. Yeah.
There, I'm guessing that there are certain seed companies that you would like us to stay away from.
Not seed companies. I have a little bit of an chip on my shoulder about down in Missouri.
Baker Creek?
Baker Creek, yeah, Baker Creek, yeah.
Yeah.
For reasons I've heard, and I've not bought anything from them myself. One thing that particularly brought me wrong is in their online, their website, people sending stuff, and there were some remarks in there that were extremely anti-Semitic. And they didn't put it in, but it was one of the lists. They said it's not our fault what people say. It is. You can delete that. You do not have to list stuff in it, someone making some Jew-baiting remark. I was disgusted with it, and they should have been too. That told me something about them. They weren't the one who wrote that listing, but they allowed it to be there. But that has nothing to do with the quality of their seed. I heard from people that deal with them that buy seeds. In fact, a former worker there said that Jared is kind of a little out of control. He's trying to do what I am, which is bad. He's overreaching. And for a commercial seed company, that's particularly problematic. So yeah, some of the things we're seeing on seeds that was too old, that the quality was beyond determination. They should have been, they were careless about that. Some, the purity was not absolutely certain. I sympathize with them a little bit because I know the difficulty of doing that, but still, that's getting a little ahead of yourself. Those are not strong. I'm not suggesting therefore we should all boycott Baker Creek by a long shot. There are some things about them that have a bad taste. Other companies that I know, the companies that you should support, let's put the positive side of it. There are some companies, one of my favorites is Southern Exposure, and which is a company seeded by the Acorn Seed Committee, which are some, in fact, the director of our grassroots seed network works for, she's there, she works for that. And they have no hybrid seeds, whatever. I was going to say, we're talking about which seed companies should be aware of, saying varieties. I'm going to suggest that each one of you should avoid F1 hybrid seeds, even if you have no intention in the world of ever saving seeds, that Brussels sprout variety, I'm never going to save seeds, so why not just get the hybrid seeds? In many cases, the hybrid seeds may be superior, sometimes they're not, but even if they are, I'm going to tell you a little about what a hybrid, F1 hybrid is. It's basically, it's created by the plant breeder takes one strain of a variety. Let's say a squash, winter squash, takes a strain of green Hubbard squash. And he deliberately, for several generations, inbreeds it, selects it, or gets it very narrow. This is not a good thing to do routinely, but he's doing it to get uniformity. He's basically narrowing out all the off types, getting to an extreme level of uniformity for 3 or 4 generations, let's say. At the same time, he takes a strain of buttercup squash and selects it. He gets 2 very inbreed lines. Then in 1 generation, he makes a cross, and it's very much like a spark. You end up with a new variety, this hybrid, which we'll call it whatever you want to call it. But it is not either of those parent varieties. You have to give it a new name. You end up with a variety that may be very superior to each parent. It'll have a lot of heterosis, the opposite of heterosis, hybrid vigor in it. But the main thing about it, whether it's superior or not, is you can't save your own seed with that. At least it's not practical to. You can become a breeder, you can try to select it out, stuff like that. That's too bad. Because if the plant breeder had incentive to do so, he could take that F1 hybrid and then reselect it for several, typically they say about 7 generations. Select it to get it so it's just as uniform as the original cross, or nearly so, but is stable. They talk about dehybridizing. Technically it's not dehybridizing, it's stabilizing a hybrid. Now you get a new variety, which, yes, offer that variety, and I would buy it. However, why should he not do that? Well, now you have to go back and buy seeds from him again. If he wants to keep you a captive customer coming back, he's going to keep it at F1 hybrid. Only he knows the formula, the particular combination that made that hybrid. So you can't, it's not practical for you to do it yourself. So therefore, I'm saying if we give the breeder an incentive, if you not only don't buy and plant any F1 hybrids, but don't be quiet about it. Let the seed company know. This variety, that sounds really great, but I do not buy F1 hybrid, sir. If you would offer a non-hybrid of that same kind of thing, then I would gladly buy it. Okay? Even if you are not planting and saving your seeds. Maybe Brussels sprouts is too impractical, you don't have to bother with that, and that's fine. But it gives the breeder an incentive, seed company, an incentive to find, if need be, breed. In other words, a F1 hybrid is the beginning of a very promising seed breeding workshop. But make them continue it until it's only half done. Give them the incentive to keep going with it. So that's an important factor, I'd say, is just avoid F1 hybrids, yeah.
Just to add to that story, I was listening to a talk by, I can't remember his name, but he's part of the Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance.
Bill McCormick?
Yes, and he was saying on the podcast that he's somebody who does this. He grows out hybrid seeds for several generations, and he quote-unquote dehybridizes it so that it's just an open pollinated variety with the same qualities. And he has done that with some varieties of hybrid seed. He gets to the F2 and it's exactly the same. It doesn't release all the genetics. It's already been dehybridized. So there are these seed companies who are keeping the hybrid label so that you think you can't continue saving them. And they're just out there, but you don't know that they're already.
So that deals with several good points. Yeah, for example, Alan Kepler, PhD, he always wants to put a PhD at the end. His seed company, he's a plant breeder, and he has, over the years, released a lot of varieties which are like F3 or F4 varieties. And he points out quite correctly that if you want to get, it's generally recommended to get to the F7 at least. I don't know if there's some statistical reason why when the curve levels off at F7 from thenceforth, you might still get one off plant per acre or something, but you'll basically have a very stabilized variety. And so he says, yeah, we haven't got to wait that long. We did F3 and F4. May not be perfectly pure, but good enough for most of our purposes. And he's encouraging the person buying the seed, if you're saving your own seed, further select for that. That's all very, very good. There are some varieties, this may be what you're alluding to, that, any of you know there's a cherry tomato, Sun Gold? Bloody good Sun Gold? Yeah.
Hybrid.
Did you know that's an F1 hybrid?
Yeah.
You're not supposed to be able to save seed of it. I know lots of people do save seeds and it comes quite true. Not perfectly, you said perfectly, it will not come perfectly true, but totally good for our purpose. And basically what you're, so within a single, like F2 generation, for example, you now have stabilized this variety that you can use it. Now this is the important thing to do, however, keep in mind, to be ethical about this. Another very wonderful variety that biodynamic people over in this area, they're right around here. They have taken the community in New York, with Copac, New York. They've turtle tree seeds. They've taken a very wonderful F1 hybrid onion called copra. A lot of very wonderful qualities to it, but it's an F1 hybrid. They have done the work for us. They've destabilized it. But this is the important thing. They don't sell it as copra because it is not copra. They sell it as clear dawn. My favorite onion, bar none, is clear dawn. And now I save my own seeds of it. And it has a very, very small number of off types in it, which is still very good. But they keep cleaning it up every year, getting more. And that's something you can do too. But again, it's not very practical for most of us to be improving hybrid. But the important thing is about this, anytime you take a variety like that, there's a fellow up in Wisconsin who does a lot of true potato seed. And he offers true potato seed, and a lot of people will grow it out. And when you take true, what I mean by true potato seed is potatoes are ordinarily propagated clonally. You take a potato, you cut it up into pieces. You don't try to save. In fact, I used to have 700 or 800 varieties of potatoes in my collection, and a big percentage of them here up in Maine would go year after year, never even making flowers, never making any seed. It didn't matter for my purposes. I was maintaining them clonally. But some of them would make seed, and so someone that wants to play around, be a plant breeder, I've done it 2 or 3 times, mostly accidentally, to get a new variety from that. And so it's very important, if you do that, is don't call it whatever the original seed, if the original seed comes from Congo variety, a very old Congo variety, which there are many, many synonyms around, plus many, many offspring of it, a purple skin, purple variety that was released, the purple cliff was released back in 1910, I think it was. And there are a whole bunch of varieties in my collection. I must have 20 varieties, which Ag Canada has done some DNA fingerprinting with them, and we know that British Columbia blue, Nova Scotia blue, let's see, Sharon's blue, all blue, I can't remember, there's maybe 20 varieties, which are known to be the synonyms of, they are basically Congo. They're not offspring, they are Congo, just it picks up names as they go along. So potatoes pick up diseases, well, they also pick up names. And so anyway, in such a case as that, if you say seedlings of Congo, you come up with a new variety, it may be better than, maybe not as good as, but you like it, then fine, offer it, but not as Congo. Now it becomes Will's favorite or Hank's choice or something like that, whatever name you put on it. But offer it because it's a new variety. You've created it and identified it as such. Yeah. So every one of you, those of you asking, you're asking a 50-cent question to give you $10 answers. I apologize. I like giving you sir, yes, that's true. No, you're wrong. Yeah, that's what, I'm not good at that. Yeah.
How do you keep wildlife pressure off of your seed crops?
How do what?
How do you keep wildlife pressure off of your seed
Wildlife
crops?
pressure. That is definitely a $10 question answer. That's depends on what the pressure is. We're talking about pest bugs. We're talking about deer and rabbits and woodchucks and things like that. Yeah. Well, okay. I'll give you a couple of strategies. With deer, the only thing that works at all for me is electric fence. I have a charged, a solar thing, and the fence is one single thing of that tape with little wire filaments embedded in it, and with fiberglass rods, and it's not terribly expensive. And I'll put it around the piece, just stick a rod in the ground, and I'd have to be about 3 or 4 feet off the ground. A deer can jump over it so easily. In fact, sometimes the problem is the deer might be stopped by it, but a fawn will go underneath it and I didn't realize it. The only thing that stops the fawn is that mommy didn't follow her, so you gotta go back. But this charge has about 5,000 as a capacitor, so it's volts every second or so, 5,000 volts. Even though it's coming from a 12 volt, or from the house, really coming from regular house current. And a deer puts its tongue on that. But the thing is, we need to make the deer put its tongue on that. That's the problem. Because deer aren't big on plastic with wire filaments in it. What they really like is I take every 30 feet or so, I'll take a little scrap of aluminum foil and staple it on, not when the power's on, of course. And I'll smear a little bit of mixture of peanut butter and some kind of crappy brand of grape jelly or something on it. Smear that on them. And they'll come, yeah, I know, yeah, I am a vegan, but I'm not necessarily compassionate about animals, particularly my animals. And the deer will come along and put its tongue on that, there's that, all of a sudden he doesn't think Will's kale tastes all that tasty. That can be very effective. But you have to keep it up. It's amazing. Sometimes I've had before, had the battery had disconnected for a couple of days, and the buggers are back in there. I wonder, don't they learn? I think they can smell it or something. I think they can get near it and know that it's hot without necessarily putting their tongue on it again. That's the only explanation I can think of, because, how would they, raccoons, I do the exact same thing. I only need to do that with my corn, field corn and sweet corn and popcorn. I'll put a thing, but it'll be like 8 or 10 inches off the ground. In fact, I'll put a stake in with 2 wires in that case. And in that case, it's smooth, just like regular smooth fence wire. It's not the tape stuff. And you can hook it up to a battery or to the house current. And that works completely. Just gotta be very careful sometimes going up a terrace. I'll take a shortcut up that way and leave a bit of a gap under that kind of stuff. But yeah. You people are much smarter than me. You won't make these mistakes, I know, but I'm just telling you what can go wrong.
Does it work on woodchucks?
Woodchucks, yeah.
It seems to work with woodchucks, even though a woodchuck could easily burrow under it. They don't seem to. It does seem to work. I don't have woodchucks as much as I used to. They show up from time to time, and sometimes I get rid of them by lead poisoning. I kill them. Yeah, I don't eat them, but I kill them. And generally I don't have to. One time I got with a rock. I was quite close. I was like, me to you. And I saw him, and he froze. So I picked up a rock and hit him. I'm not that good of a shot, but I hit him right in. I would much rather avoid that, as I don't eat animals for different reasons, but one of them is I don't like to harm animals if I don't have to. If I have to pay, I'll kill anything if I have to. But if I can avoid it, I like to, and I find lots of ways of avoiding it with these things. One of the most problematic in my case, which is weird, is wild turkeys. When they first introduced them to the state, I was delighted, and I still am. They were here long before me and the likes of me were. I think they belong here, but they are a pain in the ass for me. And most of the usual things don't work that well for them. They get it. And the funny thing is they'll do a lot of damage even when they don't go after, like I can get into tomatoes, and they'll paw around, and they'll basically destroy the tomato with hardly touching the tomato. They may not even eat the fruit. They may or may not pack some fruit, but the thing will be ruined because they just disturb it. They're just so messy, so disruptive. And I haven't got a good solution for those. I've killed 1 or 2, but I haven't in recent years, and I'd like to find a much better solution to them. There are things, like some things, that, what's it called, a couple of products that are, keep deer away. Hinder is one of them, that you spray on the thing, and deer, a whole bunch of animals can't stand that. They sell it mainly for deer, but it works very well. The main kind that's out there, the base is putrid egg white, egg yolks or something. And again, being a vegan, I know I don't eat animals, but I like to avoid animal products. And so there is another kind that supposedly doesn't have that in it, and I'm actually researching that, because that can be kind of a panacea, something to spray on something, and they usually last for quite a while. But, so those are some ideas, some others, I don't know. I did an article a while ago, if you look at the Maine online, the Mofka newspaper, I write every quarter, I write an article for them, and I did one on pest control and all the things from the last couple of years. And you can go online and get it for free, you don't have to be a subscriber.
Thank you.
It might give you some ideas, yeah.
We have time for one more question.
Okay.
So does the nutrient content differ greatly from one kind of, let's say, bean from another bean, you know?
I mean, the simple answer, since this is my last question, the simple answer is yes, it is. How much it is and what ways it is. Some varieties are very good accumulators of something, and one bean may happen to have a little bit of boron in it or something which none of the other beans all have, or, I mean, that gives an example, I don't know if that's true or not, but some have better high protein content and things like that. It is. That's the simple answer, yeah. Which ones have more this or that? Again, some of these things, like varieties from the USDA, the National Germplasm System, their catalogs, some of the things they will say, this has been tested, they screened the entire collection for B6 level or something like that, or carotene level, and wow, that's valuable. But it's generally hard to know what they are, but yeah, there are differences. And it's said, again, this is apocryphal, I can't guarantee this from experience, is that a variety that grown in Hoboken, New Jersey, didn't have that much of this, but grown here in New Hampshire, has certainly much better, more protein in it. And again, it's hearsay, and I don't know how you would know which. There are differences. That's the simple answer. Yes. So.
Awesome. Thank you, Will.